This episode of Kind of Funny Gamescast is brought to you by Sherry's Berries. There's no one quite like your Valentine. This year, treat them to an unforgettable gift that's as unique as they are. Don't tell her, but I'm definitely getting Gia some of these babies. Sherry's Berries will deliver your gift fresh and on time, guaranteed, or your money back. These berries are decadent, fresh, juicy, and sweet, and most importantly, shareable. And you can choose to get them dipped in white, milk, or dark chocolatey goodness. With Valentine's Day right around the corner, there's only one way to get freshly dipped strawberries from Sherry's Berries, starting at $19.99. You visit berries.com. That's berries.com. Click on the microphone in the top right-hand corner and type in Gamecast. That's berries.com using the code Gamecast. Help support our show and get some sweet, sweet berries for your sweet, sweet lover.
Love it.
Next topic. I want to talk about Scorpio.
Yeah, you do.
Specifically, I want to talk about what it needs to do to succeed in the market that we have going right now. Now that we know what the Switch looks like, now that we know where the PS4 Pro falls, what does Microsoft need to do to market this thing correctly? What do we think that they'll do? And all of that. This kind of jumps off as the day that we're recording this. There was a whole bunch of leaked things of
Digital Foundry.
Talking about Digital Foundry. Talking about specs
and the developer.
teraflops and all that stuff. Yeah. But that on the morning show, you and Nick kind of watched the original pitch video from last year's E3 where they announced the Scorpio and talking about it. And I heard it just from the other room, but it was like there was a lot of things being said. I was like, man, I don't even remember them saying that. So it's kind of the jumping off point.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, it stems from, because this isn't about the news. The news is out there. We're going to reference a bunch of it. But for me, it was, I don't think the Scorpio we're going to get shown at E3 and then supposedly released in holiday 2017 is going to be what they pitched anymore. I think they're going to change course on this, and I think they're going to change course on it because of what's happened with PlayStation 4 Pro. Because what you're talking, the news today, right, was twofold. And not necessarily related. I'm not, because it's a gaff thread where one of the developers of Ori and the Blind Forest chimed in, and then it was Digital Foundry dropping these white papers or whatever, right? You read all this stuff today?
Well, I saw the Digital Foundry story, and then I saw the post on NeoGAF that was then turned into a story or whatever.
Exactly. So the whole Digital Foundry thing here is these white pages, right? Which is the document they gave to the developers or whatever about talking about this. What's important is that it was dated just after the Scorpio's E3 reveal. So I think what they're talking about here is still based on what happened there, and like, here's what we think we are, here's what the market we think we are, and I think they probably changed, because what I've always thought is the most enticing argument made, and this is, I think Colin probably coined it right after E3, and we were all talking about it and all thinking about it. Colin put it really succinctly, right, is the fact that they've lost this generation. Xbox One has lost to PlayStation 4. Xbox One has fantastic games. It's sold really well, but when you compare it to a juggernaut of PlayStation 4, they can't make up that ground. And so they have to concede the ground, as Colin said, and move on to something else. And that's what Scorpio gets to be. And so when they started talking about it, it really did sound, and that's what this whole document is, right after the fact, it sounded interesting, but here they're talking about the fact that, again, it's, they're talking about not running it in native 4K necessarily. There's references to it, right? But it's talking about how to, this is all so technical and above my head and pay grade that, we're not going to even pretend to go into it. But they're talking about upsampled this.
Flops!
The 6 flops, of course.
Stuff.
The second major technique it advocates is sparse rendering, which is better known in the post-PS4 Pro era as checkerboarding. It's doing the same thing, right? So not only does Microsoft advocate the same technique for Scorpio, it also cites the same impressive work Ubisoft did in Rainbow Six, which, to the point where it's the exact same presentation shown to me, the reporter for Digital Foundry, by Mark Cerny a few months back, is referenced in the white paper. So it's one of those things where a lot of people took this report today and were like, fuck Scorpio. It is just the PlayStation 4 Pro, a little bit more powerful, but it's doing the same thing and da-da-da-da. But then it got interesting, I thought, when you take that into the context of this is where we were at E3, and then the comment from Thomas Mahler, who worked on Ori and the Blind Forest on GAF, where on GAF, Windforce asked, is Scorpio their PS4 Pro or a new generation? I'm super confused. Thomas said, all consoles are now x86 PCs and the architecture will remain the same. That's why Sony was able to quickly iterate on the PS4 and make a beefier version of it. Scorpio is a next-gen machine with the added benefit that all of your old games will still be compatible. From this point on, similar to PCs, you'll not lose your library when you buy a next-gen system. I guess since NeoGAF is confused, Microsoft will need to do a little work to make it clear to everyone the Scorpio isn't just a half-assed upgrade, parentheses, which the PS4 kind of is, end parentheses.
PS4 Pro.
So, yeah, I'm sorry, PS4 Pro. But a full-blown next-gen machine that's not just backwards compatible with your current library. This then got us into the conversation on the morning show about the fact that, and this is an E3 conversation we had, that how is the Xbox Scorpio going to run all your Xbox One games? But they made a big point at E3 that you can play the Scorpio game. The games we're putting out are on both consoles, and there's all these different things, and it's this ecosystem. It's this family of Xbox where you can play everything. And it's like, well, then what the point is the fucking Scorpio? Which again is, what's the point of PlayStation 4 Pro in a certain respect? Because it looks better, and we're up-resing to 4K and doing all these different things. I'm making the hypothesis today on the Gamescast that this is what they thought the Scorpio was going to be. And that what they were moving forward, then they saw the reaction of the Pro, and they saw how excited people were about what they thought the Scorpio was going to be, and that they're changing the Scorpio to be the next-gen machine that Thomas is talking about.
Yeah.
Now, the reason behind...
Which is what we've been saying for a long time.
The reason behind that is the fact... I thought this was interesting, too. This is from the No video over on Rooster Teeth they were talking about, or, No's channel. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's Rooster Teeth property. Ashley pointed out in her news story, right, that the Scorpio landing page originally got changed when it was up there after the Pro went live, got changed to the first and only console to enable true 4K gaming and high fidelity VR, right? That's how they were describing the Scorpio. Since then, it's been changed. Now, she was using this to key in on the 4K gaming, but maybe that's not really true. Maybe it's just like the Pro. I think it's much more interesting here in terms of this. Now it says, the most powerful console ever, featuring 6 teraflops of graphical processing power, true 4K gaming, and compatibility with Xbox One games and accessories. For me, it's that last line, compatibility with Xbox One games and accessories.
Yep.
Not everything is compatible in this family anymore. This new machine that Thomas is saying is next gen, that is more powerful, that is their next gen move, is compatible. Yeah. It's backwards compatible. It is not... Xbox One's not going to be forwards compatible with this. That's not what we're getting into. I also thought it was interesting they dropped high fidelity VR from it. That I know that's been the thing back and forth, Oculus that, blah, blah, blah. But that's not where they're going anymore, right? They're talking about the most powerful console ever, 6 teraflops of graphical processing power, true 4K gaming, and compatibility with Xbox One.
Yeah. I mean, this all adds up. I mean, like just thinking, we haven't talked about Scorpio for a long time, but immediately, even on our Gamescast right after E3, we were talking about how like this is the Xbox 2 or whatever.
Sure.
There's no way this is just going to be an incremental update with the way that they're talking about it. Now, my thing is, does it come out this year? Yeah. I don't think so.
I think there's no way.
I mean, if anything, it's like, does it even come out early next year, or does it not come out until end of 2018? I think that's the most likely thing that we
if it's end of 2018, it's a full year delayed, then I think it's exactly what we're talking about here, where this was what it was going to be, and they saw the reaction of Pro, and they were like, nope, we can't do that.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to what I've been saying forever about the PS4 Pro and with the Xbox One S, where it's just like they're new versions of the same system that give different functionality to people that want it. Like the Xbox One S has the 4K, the Ultra HD Blu-rays and all that stuff, and it has HDR, and then they added HDR even to the normal PS4 Pros or PS4s. But PS4 Pros are for enthusiasts that want to have the option to have the higher frame rates or better resolution or whatever going for them. But like Scorpio is a totally different beast, and for them to even pretend like all the games are going to be backwards and forwards compatible, it's like that just doesn't make sense for how people buy games and how consoles work and all that. But it then reminds me of things like the 3DS and new 3DS, where it's like there has been examples of new hardware that's the same hardware that limits it, and Nintendo's done it before, even with like Game Boy and Game Boy Color, where majority of the software library works on both, but then there is the new 3DS exclusive games or the Game Boy Color exclusive games. This doesn't sound like that. This doesn't sound like there's going to be, I mean, if I were to bet, I don't bet that there'll be Scorpio exclusive games. I think that there'll be Scorpio games, and it is just going to be that move on. There will be ports. It's going to be just like we've seen for the last.
Well, yeah, because I think that's what they realized, right? Because I think that's the whole thing, and especially from Microsoft's corner, we're talking about what Scorpio needs to do, right, to matter. And to matter, it needs to be their next system. It cannot be iteration. It cannot be a little bit better, because PlayStation had trouble with that messaging. And for me, I mean, my same argument that I apply to PlayStation, I apply to this, but then I have a new bullet point for it of just like, I turn my Xbox One on 3 times a year. I mean, not including when we Skype call with it or do whatever with it. So to actually play exclusives and play things that I can't get on PlayStation or somewhere else. Why would I ever why would I give them more money to do that, right? But if it was the fact of, okay, cool, it plays all your old Xbox One games, so I'll get any exclusive that comes to Xbox One, but it's also going to give you, for the next 12 to 18 months, games that are only on Scorpio until there's a PlayStation 5, until there's like this thing.
Yeah.
That's where it gets fascinating.
Man, it's so funny that we've come so far in gaming technology that we went from backwards compatibility being a given to being taken from us to now coming back as being an exciting thing. It's just like, that's just ridiculous, but that is exactly what seems to be happening here.
I think it's complicated. I think when they announced Scorpio, I think that they were announcing an idea. And they probably, and I'm sure Microsoft's a big company, R&D, lots of different things. They probably had multiple consoles, and they were trying to figure out which way to go forward, understanding that their competition was planning something what might be similar, might not be similar. I think it is fairly obvious that PlayStation 4 Pro has not lit the world on fire. The only evidence you need to know is that Sony doesn't talk about it. So the first time I had ever seen anyone from Sony talk about it was some random guy in Singapore saying how they're trying to manufacture more of them, but from what I've been told from multiple people, they're on store shelves wherever you go. So it's not like the thing's rare. So this is a niche device for a wider audience of 55 million or so group of people that own PlayStation 4. And I think Microsoft looks at this in a different way, which is the Scorpio, I agree, is the Scorpio as an incremental step is a mistake because Xbox is already losing. So now you're dealing with a much smaller group of people. I mean, the latest estimate I saw was maybe 26 million Xbox Ones in the wild, which means that they're losing by more than 2 to 1 to PlayStation, which is bad. Now, 26 million units is very respectable. That puts it in the same league as the original Xbox. That puts it in the same league as GameCube, and they will still sell millions more. So it'll end up in the 30s. It'll probably end up around or past N64, which is fine on that kind of pantheon of consoles sold. But I think that they probably chose a path, and I think that there's multiple reasons why they probably chose it. I think one is that when they were talking about the idea of Scorpio, when they were talking about what was going to be and what it can do, my assumption is that they were aiming for a late 2017 release in the hopes that a lot of the components would become cheaper, because the rumors were when people were talking about this, it's like, this sounds like literally like an $800 machine. Like this isn't something that's even possible for the mass market. And they probably looked at that and they're like, you're probably right. And the other thing is that, and it, you know, as we talked about, not necessarily a unique idea, but that they lost, and it's time to kind of move on. The thing that I'm concerned about for them, and the thing that I think is going to start getting super muddled, and maybe it's just my organizational OCD mind, is that now the generations are just totally fucked up, because now
we have a split one.
Switch is coming out in a month. PS4 has been out since 2013. Xbox One's been out since 2013. PS4 Pro is just an incremental device. Scorpio sounds like it's going to be a new console, because I believe much more than the white paper. I believe the person who has this clearly is, you know, the people at Moon Studios or whatever. That's what the studio's called, right? That made Ori. Those people are in the second party. They have the device, I'm sure.
And this is the current information.
Right, exactly. So I totally defer to him, and he's being very, it's not cagey, it's not ambiguous or nebulous at all. He's saying it's a new console, it's a new generation, it is a backwards compatible system. So what I think is going to happen is akin to what you were saying is, let's say that there's a new Halo game next year or something like that. It'll be on both consoles. And it'll be similar to the PS4 and PS3 jump when Call of Duty Ghosts was on PS3 and PS4.
Or Switch with Zelda.
Exactly. And then they're going to, that will be done specifically, because that doesn't need to be done, because the Scorpio, it will be backwards compatible, but it has to be done because of the way they communicated what the console was going to be. And they did say straight up, this thing is just a continuation of Xbox One in so many words, and the games will all be available on it. But that's not possible, because to your point, what is the point then of doing this at all? It's just you're always going to be held back by the lowest common denominator, which is why the PS4 Pro makes no sense, and why I think Microsoft is seeing that and seeing like, this is a new push. The problem becomes now that everyone, not really so much Nintendo, but the two competitors in Microsoft or Sony, in my mind, are now going to be watching each other somewhat tentatively and somewhat timidly, because now they're going to be so far apart and spaced so far apart with these consoles that Microsoft has to be very careful about not putting this thing out too soon. Because now PS5, which is certainly R&Ding right now at Sony, My assumption, PS5 fall 2018, I think is a safe bet, and will be fully backwards compatible. Again, safe bet with PlayStation 4, and they probably go way down the rabbit hole and making backwards compatible with everything, at least digitally. And that Sony has done on the PlayStation Network, for instance. So PS1, why can't you play PS1 classics on the PS4? No one fucking knows. And I'm sure that that's going to be a problem that's nipped in the bud there. But if Sony now has a chance as the winner of this generation to look at what Microsoft's doing and be like, we're going to beat you now. We'll use our own dynamic economies of scale to buy cheap parts and make a better and more dynamic machine that's going to make your machine look really bad, or at least subpar, or at least not as powerful. That's a mistake for Microsoft. I think Microsoft should hold on as long as possible before releasing this console.
I'm with you. They need each other. I think that's the most important part. Is why, I mean, when you look at the Switch, like the biggest point of feedback from the general consumer, not from the Nintendo fan, is where's the third-party support? And the third-party support only exists in the way that it does for Microsoft and Sony because they both have each other to exist, and the third parties know they can sell to this large audience of both consumer bases, right? And so if we are now creating a 3-tiered system, there's gonna be a clear winner, a clear loser in terms of the HD twins or whatever, and then there's gonna be third-party exclusives where it's like, well, Call of Duty's better on Xbox and Battlefield's better on PlayStation, for example, whatever, and they're gonna have to double down that way, and it's gonna get nasty. And like, I don't think that it's good to create a system where the exclusives matter to a point with the third parties where hardcore gamers need all 3 systems. I think we're in a good place right now where you're really okay with one or the other of PlayStation or Xbox. And if you like Nintendo games, get the Wii U or the now Switch, you know? But creating a divide between what the Xbox and PlayStation is, I think it could be very detrimental to third parties as a whole, which means the gamers are going to get fucked.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Sony seems to be playing this the smartest right now, even though I think PS4 Pro is an unnecessary stumble. And again, you know, they would be talking about it more if it was selling. That and I'm sure it's doing fine. But how long did it take them to announce that 1 million PS4s were sold in the United States on day one? It took them 1 day to say that. So if PS4 Pro was this thing that was lighting everything up, and Microsoft could look at that because they have, I'm sure they're fucking birdies chirping in their ear too, and everyone knows what the other hand's doing, right? Like, then they would be going a different way. Again, the Ori dude saying that this is a new console, again, it creates a whole series of frankly endemic problems to this particular industry that could cause issues for them. And the only thing that he's saying, which I think, or the one thing that he says, which is positive, is that it's all based on the same architecture. So porting between them should be at least easier than porting from Cell to Xbox 360, for instance, on the PlayStation 3. But you are going to deal with these different, I guess, just a variable group of sliders, basically, that are going to have to be dealt with for all of these different games. You're creating more work. Now, PS4, PS4 Pro, Xbox One, Scorpio, PC. Now there are going to be 5 SKUs that these guys have to deal with.
The thing is, Switch as well, if I'm not incorrect about this, and I might be because this is the tech stuff I don't know at all, but the architecture you're talking about, the x86 or whatever, isn't that also what the Switch is on?
I don't know anything about that.
I'll check it for you.
But
I think
so possibly 6 SKUs. This is going to start to piss actually the publishers and the developers off. And so I think that they're probably going to get that feedback, or I assume that they're getting that feedback. I'd be interested to see what feedback Sony's getting on Pro, what kind of patch response some of these games, like for instance, to go back and patch Tomb Raider, for instance, which is a game that didn't even sell that well on PS4 at all. Is Crystal Dynamics like that was a complete fucking waste of our time? That was a complete waste of our resources. This is all important data for them to garner before they make any moves. So I'm with you. I don't think Scorpio's coming out this year. If it comes out this year, then it is more akin to PS4 Pro.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge mistake because they've already lost, and you're dealing again with a group of people that is just much smaller and much less interested in buying a new console. Plus, Microsoft is actually sending mixed signals with Xbox publishing in the terms of like, well, all of our games are now on PC. Now all of our games are going to be on Xbox One. Now all of our games are going to be on Scorpio. It's like it's just a confusing kind of message that I think is actually not positive for Xbox as a hardware brand. Very positive perhaps for Xbox as a publisher of games. But they're not going to cede that ground to Sony. So like they're obviously going to keep making consoles. They should. The Xbox One's a very respectable piece of kit. So it's like, I want to see how this all shakes out. But if I were them, I would wait as long as humanly possible, and I would launch this console in the fall of 2018, which is when, again, I think the PS5 is going to launch. So, because these guys have to make a move and to placate the developers and the publishers.
Switch does not use x86.
What does it use?
ARM. I don't know what that is exactly, but
yeah,
there you go, something different.
Don't know what I was talking about. But
I mean, the big thing is too, just I mean, like it could go either way too, because you figure if you're a third party, how much work do you want to put into an exclusive SKU for just Xbox Scorpio, right? Like, if PlayStation 4 is what's moving all the units, you're going to do all that. And if Scorpio comes out and doesn't set the world on fire either, and does respectably, well, you're not going to go out of your way to fucking make a different SKU. Yeah, you'll up-res the graphics and be done with it.
Yeah.
We'll see how it all shakes out. It is interesting that Microsoft seems to be scaling back game releases, or at least investing in different ways and canceling, removing, for instance, Lionhead from the docket, pushing Phantom Dust away, canceling Scalebound. This might be a way to clear the docket of games that are just not going to sell units in order to kind of, you have to still placate the audience that's there, and there's a significant Xbox One audience that's buying games, but at the same time, similar to what I think we saw with Wii U, they could be being like Crackdown, for instance. Crackdown has been in development for a long time, but could Crackdown be a Scorpio game? Could it be a cross-generation game?
Mm-hmm.
What does the word generation now mean? Like the generation structure was really broken first by Dreamcast, and it was the exception to the rule. It wasn't really the rule. PS2 came out in 2000, Xbox and GameCube came out in 2001. Xbox 360 came out in 2005, Wii and PS3 came out in 2006. Xbox One came out in 2013, PS4 came out a few weeks before it, I think, in 2013. So now we're going to have this whole fucked up, I don't know how this plays. I don't know if it matters, but I think it probably does.
See, I mean, for me, I do think that Scorpio is the next Xbox system, and I agree with you that I think the longer they hold off to that window of 2018 holidays, I think is best for them. But I do think that there is a chance that Scorpio, I don't think this is going to happen, but I think that if it does release fall this year and it is just a PS4 Pro, they don't call it Scorpio. It's literally something to the equivalent of Xbox One Pro. I don't think that that's such a bad move. I think that at least then they're not saying that it's a new system, and they are allowing themselves to just give you more options. Because like, I disagree with you about the PS4 Pro in the sense that I think it's awesome for people that want it, and it's like doesn't need to light the world on fire because it's there for the people that care about 4K and care about for all those things. And I think that there is an Xbox One audience that is equivalent to that. And I think that at this point with Microsoft, them losing and all of that, there's many decisions they can make. I think that the smart decision would be to move on to the next console and not have a Pro, just because like why waste the energy on that at this point. But they made such bold claims with the Scorpio that do they want to risk upsetting the loyal fans that believe what they're saying?
Right.
And if they were to release a PS4 Pro version that is way the strongest thing we've seen thus far, it's going to be a lot easier to do that this year than it will be to create a whole new system that's backwards compatible next year.
Right. Well, two things. One, the pros for someone, and I'm speaking more from a bird's eye view in terms of there's something for everyone. The question was this a wise course of action for the industry? Was this a wise course of action for Sony? And was this a wise investment for them? Or should they have just not done anything at all? Which is my take, and brings you to an alternate outcome for this, which is that Sony, looking at PlayStation 4 outpacing still most of its other hardware that it's ever released, and still in the spectrum of PlayStation 2, do they just go, we're not releasing anything for a fucking long time. We're letting this thing go and go and go until 2020, for instance. In which case, this gives Microsoft an opening to do either of those things, which might be what Microsoft is banking on, which is to say, like, we could release an incremental console, which is still going to be more powerful than PS4 Pro, because Sony is selling so well that they don't need to do anything, or we release a new console which will dwarf in power the PlayStation 4, which will hopefully take wind out of its sails and force Sony to push ahead what its plans were. So this is a dynamic situation, but I would endeavor to say that Microsoft has lost. We all know that. Doesn't mean that the console's bad. Doesn't mean that there's no value to be had there, but that it is imperative on them to make the move first. And the move that they make first is going to really illustrate maybe perhaps the next decade in the gaming industry, because Sony's going to have to be very reactionary to this. Nintendo doesn't seem to care what anyone's doing, but it's an important step for these guys to take one way or the other, and I'll be watching with great interest to see what Microsoft does, because I think it will paint the entire landscape based on their reaction. And they are a wily company that knows exactly what they're doing. The Xbox 360 the original Xbox was no joke as far as a console. It was ahead of its time in a lot of ways. I'd say the same thing about the Dreamcast in a lot of ways. These consoles were actually well ahead of their time. The fact that the original Xbox came with an Ethernet port was an incredible step. You had to buy an attachment for PS2 and GameCube to do that kind of stuff. And the Xbox 360 itself was ahead of its time as well. The Xbox One read the digital tea leaves, I think, in a strange way that hurt them, and their communication hurt them. But this is a company, I guess what I'm saying is that they can pull shit that will be very dynamic and very interesting to a lot of people. And I wouldn't underestimate whatever this console is. I wouldn't underestimate it at all, because this is Phil Spencer is not Matrick. Is not Don Matrick, and they have something to prove, and I think they have a fucking huge chip on their shoulder because
100%.
I don't think the Xbox One's performance is equivalent to the power and the usefulness and the draw of the console. I really do think they are paying for the way it was introduced still.
Yep.
And I think they know that. I think this console probably could have been in the 30s or 40s in terms of millions sold if it wasn't rolled out like that, and I think that they are mad that happened, and I think they will have everything buttoned up and ready to go regardless of which direction
They're
go.
going to come out with a very PlayStation 4 approach because that's what they have right now. It's just quiet about it, but they are all about games. And when this thing it gets announced, it's not going to be TV, Call of Duty. It's going to be like, here's why this is the gaming machine you need. And guess what, guys? It's got all these new games on here that are exclusive to this platform, Scorpio. You won't find anything else here. And everything that's still coming out, you can get. So if you didn't get an Xbox One, if you missed all this great content, get on board now. We're packing in all these different things. This is what's happening, blah, 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 blah.
There you go. Any closing words?
I think the tagline should be come home. They're taking back this generation.
Come home. I like it.